And it is not about making insurance more expensive for people. It is about enshrining the social solidarity and the intergenerational solidarity that all sides of the House here espouse to. And I commend the bill to the House and would like to move to the next stage.
Thank you, Minister. Now put the question that the bill be now read a second time. Is that agreed? Not agreed. Chocty atá a héad na ceiste abadís tá. Chocty atá na gine abadís néad. Sílim gine ceist Richard. Vote. The division is postponed until immediately after the order of business on Tuesday, the 26th of November 2013, in accordance with the order of the Dail of today. Thank you very much. We now move on to topical issues.
Topical issues. Deputies Martin Hayden, Pat Deering, Paddy Coffey, Michael Colreevy, Martin Ferris, John Paul Phelan, Brian Stanley and Peadar Tobin. First topical issue is to the Minister for Communications, Energy and Natural Resources. The need for meaningful engagement by Eirgrid with the communities who have real concerns regarding the proposed gridlock or gridlink routes. The deputies have 16 minutes in total to make an initial statement, and the Minister has 4 minutes to reply, and the deputies have 8 minutes in total for a supplementary statement, and the Minister has 2 minutes for a concluding statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for coming to take in this very important topical issue today. Minister, the Gridlink project goes through my constituency in Kildare South. Eirgrid have shown us 5 overground options in stage 1 of the project development and consultation roadmap. They have not shown us any underground options. When questioned on why that is, they just say that it's more expensive. If it is far more expensive, and if it's technically much more difficult to do, I'd like to say, why not do a full open analysis on it to prove that case to the public? The lack of confidence in Eirgrid at present, and there is a lack of confidence in Eirgrid at present, is due to the fact that they haven't clearly explained how and why the underground option won't work. They just expect us to accept that. In the review by the International Expert Commission, which you established in 2011, they remarked on the ever-changing technology regarding the undergrounding. While that report is already aged somewhat in that it was 2011, the Gridlink project itself won't go to planning until 2016. We need either a similar independent report for the Gridlink project or a full cost-benefit analysis of the undergrounding option. People have genuine concerns regarding overhead lines and pylons. They feel they aren't being given the due consideration at present. They have concerns about the impact on their local environment, the potential impact on their health. Farmers are concerned about the impact on their livestock. never mind the crucial equine industry, which is intrinsic to Kildare and is our county's second biggest employer, hence why we're known as a thoroughbred county. And the tourism industry is also vital to the rural economy of South Kildare. When Eirgrid say undergrounding costs more, do they take full account of the financial impact that there may be on our tourism industry? Does that factor in the financial cost of the devaluation of individual properties? I would like to see a full cost-benefit analysis, Minister, of the undergrounding option, and let us have a proper open debate on the matter, instead of the present situation where Eirgrid say it's just more expensive, so they're going to examine it. I also just want to express my frustration with the appointment of the new chairman of Eirgrid, due to the fact that he was a former chairman of An Bord Pleanála. Perception is very important when you're looking for public confidence in a process. The perception that there is any link between Eirgrid and the board is not helpful. We all know that ultimately the board will deliberate and decide on this issue.
You're over time
Not only
now,
does the
Deputy.
process need to be beyond reproach, it needs to be seen to be beyond reproach.
Deputy Pat Deering.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I'd like to thank the County Controller's Office, particularly this particular important matter, and also like to thank the Minister for being here today. As you're aware, Minister, we're waiting to get this issue up for a number of weeks. Like my colleagues, I have attended numerous meetings in my constituency over the past number of weeks to discuss this particular serious matter. I may have listened to the concerns of the people in my constituency. Carlow, where I come from, being the second smallest county in the country, has at this stage 4 designated routes going through it. And it is hard to understand how a small county such as Carlow would have 4 routes going through it. But having said that, you know, this issue only became to light because of the lack of consultation in a number of weeks, even though it's 18 months ago this plan came into being first of all. But because only in the last 6 weeks 4 routes were identified, it's only then that people become aware of the problem that was there. People are genuinely concerned because of the lack of consultation. And in your own strategic plan set out in 2012, you set out a roadmap, and I quote from it: "The government underlines the imperative for state companies and all developers of energy projects of early, transparent engagement and consultation with local communities and stakeholders, and the appropriateness of building community gain consideration into project planning and budgeting as an intrinsic part of the ongoing consultation with local communities and local authorities." This, in my opinion, is key to the whole project going forward. We must have local communities being on side. We must have local community gain as well. At those meetings I attended, I heard nobody dissenting as the fact that we needed to upgrade our infrastructure. Nobody. But they did have issues with regard how it was going to be done, and the fact that there was a lack of information out there. The fact that we don't have a cost-benefit analysis of the implications of underground versus overground, of the implications on the environment, on the tourism issues, on the land evaluation, and all those matters. And in my opinion, only way to solve this problem as an independent expert group to come in to analyse these costs and move forward so we can get a definite analysis of the whole issue.
Thank you. Deputy Paddy Coffey.
Thank you, Las Cathaoirleach, and I want to thank the County Controller for taking this important topic. Minister, I do believe we need to have a wider debate on the whole issue of energy security and energy demand. And, you know, there is quite a lot of public concern out there. And we as public representatives have a responsibility to advocate their views and their concerns and bring them here to the floor of Dáil to have them addressed. And communities have expressed concerns, deep concern to me, Minister, regarding the lack of the level of engagement by Eirgrid. And the public confidence is suffering in this regard. They seem, in my opinion, and this is what I'm hearing, and we had them before the Joint Oireachtas Committee, where reasonable people came forward to voice their concerns that Eirgrid just seem to be ticking the boxes as regards consultation. They are speaking in broad generalisations, and there is no transparency around the process and the issues involved. There is no specific engagement with regard to the costings that are being proposed. There is over €500 million being proposed in the South East for Eirgrid investment, and we have no transparent, accountable life cycle cost-benefit analysis of the proposals that we as public representatives should see, and indeed the public should see as well, so that we have full transparency around this debate. Minister, in Waterford, despite the fact there's a proposed line going right through the centre of County Waterford, right across the Cumra Mountains and the Blackwater Valley, which are areas of scenic amenity and protected areas as well, I might add, Eirgrid have chosen not to provide an office for public engagement at all in the whole county of Waterford. They also chose not to advertise in the local papers in West Waterford regarding the proposals. This is a fact, Minister, and you know, if we want real consultation, I think we must inform the public fully and openly, and I think they are entitled to that. And Minister, the Joint Oireachtas Committee heard these concerns, and cross-party consensus were reached, where they've chosen to write to Eirgrid to seek an extension for the submissions, which were to close on the 26th of November. And at the very least, those submissions should be opened until the end of this year to allow the public to have their say. Thank you very much.
Okay, gentlemen, if we can stick to 2 minutes like the way Deputy Coffey did, that would be appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you.
Deputy John Paul Phelan.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And I want to thank the Concorder for having this discussion. It's taken about 3 weeks to finally get this issue discussed on the topical issue debate. And one of the frustrations as a TD is the difficulty in even getting a parliamentary question answered in anything in relation to Eirgrid, and I've had a number of them ruled out of order. I just want to raise, rather than repeat everything that's been said by the previous speakers, the utter inadequacy of what has been passed off as consultation thus far in this process. Eirgrid published about 18 months ago consultation area, including all of the 9 southern and easternmost counties in the country. Most of the area which could never have been a potential location for any potential route for any of these power lines to be constructed. And despite this consultation and an area encompassing a population of over 1 million people, there was only 500 responses, which kind of gives the indication that the consultation was certainly far from effective in alerting the general public as to what was proposed. I want to join with my colleagues in asking that the very bare minimum that the general public deserve is that Eirgrid would examine all the available options. In 2012, the government produced a new set of guidelines, which Deputy Deering referred to, for Eirgrid to look at new technologies and to examine them. And it's just not satisfactory that Eirgrid now would say there are 4 or 5 routes across the country, including my own county of Kilkenny, where we're considering putting up pylons and power lines, and to not spell out to the general public the cost implications, a detailed cost-benefit analysis as to the potential of undergrounding these particular wires. Nobody believes that I've spoken to that this infrastructure shouldn't be built, but the very least that the general public deserve is a detailed cost-benefit analysis, and it's proving almost impossible for that to be delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Brian Stanley.
This issue is causing huge concerns in County Laois, in my own constituency. We from Sinn Féin handed in a submission today into Eirgrid over this, into Eirgrid headquarters. We're very concerned about it. We see the need to upgrade the infrastructure. We don't have an objection in principle, but we have to say that there's been very little consultation on this. We're very concerned about the huge pylons that are planned, over 45 metres in height, almost 150 feet. We cannot ignore the communities along the route, and I know the Minister said that he doesn't have any great problems with these pylons, but we can't ignore the communities that live along where these rows of pylons are going to be placed. In County Laois, there's a fantastic landscape along the proposed route, along to Rossmore, Cretty Yard, Killeshin, Ballylinen, with houses dispersed right across it and farmland. So we must try and protect that. What people in Laois are concerned about is the impact on farming, the impact on landscape, hedgerows, the visual impact, and particularly the impact on tourism, which the County Council and local community groups are trying to promote that in the south-east of the county. The impact on architecture and the potential health impacts, along with, of course, the devaluation. Undergrounding has to be a real option, and for much of the route. And I have to say that we all agree that it costs more initially, but we must look at the long-term benefits of this. It lasts longer, it has a longer lifespan, it reduces the loss of power through transmission, it has less disturbance of the cable, it's not affected by severe weather, it's lower maintenance and less environmental and visual damage. So let's look at the long-term factors, and surely if we learned anything, let's not always go for short-termism. Let's look at this over a 30, 40 and 50-year period, Minister, and let's look at the long-term benefits of undergrounding where possible. It may not be possible everywhere, I accept that, but there are areas where it is possible.
Thank you very much. Deputy Patrick Dubin.
I think the Cathaoirleach might be right. This is total gridlock, I think, with regards to the government's plans here. The North-South interconnector goes through County Meath and has been pushed for the last 6 years, but I think that the government looks like it's opened too many fronts, and this is just not a regional issue anymore, it's now a national issue, and I think it's going to get bogged down as a result. There's no doubt there's need for improvement in infrastructure with regards to allowing sustainable energy onto the grid and also plugging into the European grid. But for me, the most important issue here is around the issue of health. And the European Commission body, SNCNIHR opinion states, the previous conclusion that ELF magnetic fields are a possible carcinogen, chiefly based on childhood leukemia results, is still valid. It also states, for neurodegenerative diseases and brain tumours, the link to ELF fields remains uncertain. New epidemiological studies indicate possible increases in Alzheimer's disease arising from exposure to ELF. And also, recent animal studies provide an indication for effects on the nervous system at flux densities. This warrants further investigations. Any family with kids growing up in the region of these is obviously going to be really concerned. The second issue is that these pylons eradicate the value of people's homes. And there's been many studies that have done that said any house within 2.5 kilometres of these lines suffer price reductions, and anything in less than 50 metres is going to be valueless. In the northeast, we've done studies which shown that the fallen value of housing and of land will cost €303 million. Also, by Eirgrid's own figures of €30 million cost per year delay, we're now at €180 million delay in the northeast. If these were undergrounded, there would be no problem with regards to this. So I think, and the issue of areas needing energy, Meath will get nothing in the north-south interconnect.
Time is up. Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 4 minutes to respond.
Well, firstly, Cathaoirleach, may I say thank you to the deputies who give me the opportunity to make these remarks about this issue. I don't know why it took 3 weeks for Deputy Phelan to get it on the agenda. I was out of the country on energy business over the last couple of days, but other than that, I'm available to deal with the queries anytime they're raised. Eirgrid's Grid 25 national programme, Las Concordia, and specifically the GridLink infrastructure project, is vital for future socio-economic progress in Ireland. The GridLink project is a key initiative under Grid 25. The project consists of a new 400 kV power line linking Leinster and Munster. Without this project, the grid in the south and east of Ireland would not be sufficient to meet the region's future electricity needs. The GridLink project will help enable a secure supply of electricity for the region well into the future. It will empower growth in the south and east of Ireland and involve an estimated €500 million in investment. It will also enable Ireland to meet its 40% renewable target and reduce our reliance on imported fossil fuels. In the government policy statement that Deputy Phelan referred to, which I published in July 2012, the imperative for the state companies and all developers of energy projects of early, transparent engagement and consultation with local communities and stakeholders was emphasised. Currently, the Eirgrid project team is undertaking detailed analysis of the study area in order to identify the best possible corridor for development. As part of this process, on September 3 last, Eirgrid published the Stage 1 report on the GridLink project, identifying a number of overhead route corridor options for the new 400 kV power line. The publication of that report coincided with the beginning of a 12-week public consultation period. I'm aware that Eirgrid is fully committed to extensive public consultation and that the company has been engaging in a comprehensive process in regard to the GridLink project, which has involved opening regional information centres, a low-call project information telephone line, and local radio advertising backed up by national and local print advertising. Eirgrid opened 5 project information centres at Middleton, Carlow, New Ross, Carrick-on-Shore and Kilcullen. I understand that 33 open days were held within the project area over the past 16 months, and that since autumn 2012, the GridLink project team has visited marts, shopping centres, agricultural shows, attending over 120 events to date, where thousands of stakeholders have engaged with the team and had an opportunity to inform themselves about the programme in more detail. I'm also aware that the project team briefs and updates county councils, town councils, chambers of commerce and other local organisations and national and local politicians regularly, and have done so since the launch of the project in April 2012. The current consultation process is a key opportunity for public input, as no decisions have been made regarding the final route of this electricity line. Eirgrid has stated that it will fully take on board information and views in relation to the GridLink project, which is still at an early stage. Ultimately, it will fall to An Bord Pleanála to determine whether the views expressed have been adequately taken into account in the final project design. In relation to the issue of undergrounding, I should first of all say that Eirgrid, under its licence as the transmission system operator, is obliged to plan the electricity transmission network in the most safe, secure, economic and reliable way possible. Eirgrid has set out in their information brochure for the current consultation process the rationale for why overgrounding is preferred to undergrounding generally and in relation to this specific project. Eirgrid has also stated in that same document that it is recognised that underground cabling may have to be considered to mitigate against identified environmental constraints for this project, and that this would be thoroughly investigated during the project development process. I understand the concerns raised by people in relation to the various aspects of grid development, and that there should be full opportunity to explain all aspects of the GridLink and other projects under Grid 25. I'm aware that the Joint Committee on Transport and Communications yesterday, as has been referred to, met with a number of anti-pylon community groups from the south east, north and north east regions, and the concerns of the groups concerning grid development. I understand that the committee intends to write to Eirgrid on foot of the discussions, and also that it intends to meet with representatives of the company and my department at a meeting scheduled for the 4th of December.
Thank you, Minister. Deputies, you have 1 minute each for a supplementary statement.
Thank you, and thank the Minister for his response. Minister, the Eastern Uplands in Kildare is listed in the Kildare County Development Plan and is singled out. And two of my constituents in recent months had planning permission refused by Kildare County Council for a two-storey house and a dormer house, respectively, due to the Kildare County Development Plan policy LU1, which states, to ensure that the development will not have a disproportionate visual impact due to excessive bulk, scale or inappropriate siting, and will not significantly interfere or detract on scenic upland vistas when viewed from areas nearby scenic routes, viewpoints and settlements. Planning permission was denied on both occasions, as the structures, which would be both less than 9 metres in height, would be contrary to proper planning. Yet the same individuals could see a 45-metre high pylon get a planning permission in the same location. Now, you can plant hedging and trees around a dwelling to screen it in an area, but it's very hard to screen in any way a 45-metre high pylon. People just don't understand how that could happen.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Deering.
Mr. again for his response to GridLink so far. The bottom line, Minister, I don't think you got our point. The consultation process is flawed. As you say, there are a number of offices have been opened over the past 18 months. A number of meetings have taken place at marts and shopping centres and so on and so forth. But until the lines are actually put on a map, nobody took any notice of that. Human nature being what it is, that is when people will stay up and take notice. That is why the consultation process is flawed. And that is why an independent expert group, in my opinion, is required to come in and do an analysis of the situation. At this stage, Eirgrid have no credibility in the matter because of the fact that the way they've carried on so far, because of their arrogance as regards the way they've dealt with the people so far. I spent a day last week listening to John Lowry, the project manager of Eirgrid, being very, very determined about the way it was going to be. It was going to be underground only, and because of the cost. There was no other issues concerned. And then 2 days later, I could hear John Fitzgerald, I think who was the chairman, the outgoing chairman of Eirgrid, having a different opinion completely. You know, this is where the issues rise, Chairman.
Okay,
and I would ask the Minister if he would consider an expert group that would come in and do an independent analysis of the situation that would have more credibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Coffey.
Thank you, Lascan Corla. Minister, public confidence has already been seriously undermined, and there is concern that Eirgrid will drive on, irrespective of the concerns that are being expressed. And Minister, the unfortunate thing is that this will meet huge resistance and add the cost to the project. And I think at the very least, the public deserve that a full cost-benefit analysis of the underground option be put on the table with all of the facts and figures in an open, transparent way so that it can be debated. And that will show whether it is technically possible or not. And let us decide that, first of all. And also let us decide if it is technically possible, is it feasible? Because with what's been presented at the moment, it's broad generalities. It's not convincing us. It's not convincing the public, and I think that's not acceptable. Minister, already there's a public highway, a corridor running from east to west in County Waterford, the N25, and that also runs northwards to Kildare. A publicly available highway that is an option for a route for underground cabling. I need to know whether that's a viable option or not, but no figures have been presented except a €500 billion cost for overhead lines with no detail and no specifics, and I think we need more. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy John Paul Phelan.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. In relation to the report that was produced by the independent consultants on behalf of the government with regard to the North-South interconnector, it was based largely on information and data from 2007-2008. Eirgrid in the GridLink project have already admitted, I suppose, in their public documentation that the earliest that this GridLink project will go to planning will be in 2016. So in that 8-year intervening period, I think it's not unreasonable to suspect that technologies will have changed substantially. And I'm struck by one particular point on the last page of the Minister's comments where he spoke about the responsibility of Eirgrid for the transmission network in the most safe, secure, economic and reliable way possible. Well, if the analysis that they conduct doesn't include a judgment on the economic impact on individuals in terms of their households, in terms of their potential health impact, and in particular in terms of the potential impact on tourism, which for most of the South East region, which already has the highest unemployment rate in the country, then that cost-benefit analysis will be flawed too, and it needs to encompass all aspects of cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Phelan. Deputy Stanley.
Thank the Minister for his reply. I suppose the concern about this is that the Strategic Infrastructure Act is going to be used to ram this through. And that was brought to this House here in 2006. And I think, Minister, you abstained on it at the time. We opposed it because we've seen the powers it's going to give to the large corporations to drive through these type of projects. The process has been flawed, as many of the speakers have said. I think that now, we must look at this again and we must amend that Act to give communities a real say in this and how it happens. And could I just say, Minister, that in relation to the underground, when you come up along from the South East, you have the N9 the whole way up along, and we highlighted this here, or my colleagues that were in the chamber at this time, the need to lay these cables beside motorways. You have the N9 running the whole way up along from the South East right up along to the middle of Leinster. That's where the cable should have went, beside that. That's what you should have done at the time. The ducting should have been put in for it. If that had to be done, we wouldn't be here having this discussion. Could I just ask, the last thing I want to ask you is this, is the consultation process closes on the 26th, and I have to say that everyone here has agreed, everyone that I heard speak, that they're agreed that the process has been
really
flawed.
over time now.
I would ask you to get Eirgrid to extend that to the 1st of January. I would ask that as a simple request.
Okay, I think
keep the process open to the 1st of January.
Okay. Deputy Tobin.
I suppose in the last few months we've seen an old Fianna Fáil trick happen where Fine Gael TDs and Labour TDs have played government TDs in Dublin but opposition TDs down in their constituency. They correctly complain about Eirgrid's consultation as a merry dance, but that's all it is. Eirgrid is not an independent fiefdom. It must operate within the boundaries of government legislation. None of these pylons, none of these power cables will be built in your areas if you ensure that the legislation to underground them goes ahead. So you have the power here, and don't outsource the power to Eirgrid in this. And with regards, is it technically feasible? Of course it's technically feasible. It's happening already. The 70 kilometres undergrounded in this state. The Danes, the French, the Spanish are already undergrounding these types of cables on high voltage direct currents. So I would say to the Minister, create the legislation that undergrounds. None of this type of infrastructure should be forced on the back of communities that are against it.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, you have 2 minutes for a concluding statement.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I do get the point. I can tell Deputy Deering I do get the point that what he's saying is that there is a formal process of consultation, but that there isn't real engagement. And I'm concerned about that because after the situation on North-South, I had a number of direct discussions, apart from the publication of the 2012 policy statement, where I made plain to them that I wanted them to engage with citizens along the route in their own language and explain to them why it is necessary that we have a safe, secure energy supply in this country. And a lot of money has been spent in doing that. And it's very disturbing to hear it coming back from a wide cross-section of opinion that the quality of engagement is defective. Because I gave you figures earlier about the number of open days, about the extent of interaction at community level, in the mart or shopping centres or whatever it is. And it is disappointing that that is the view of colleagues in the House. But you know, criticising the consultation process because there's 4 or 5 or 6 corridors or whatever it is. I mean, you know, Eirgrid sees it that if they went down to Waterford, say, for example, and said that's the line, there'd be an outcry about how dare you come down here and tell us what the line is. There ought to be public consultation on what is the best route and so on. There is no line in any event selected yet, but I hear the point being made. Now, Deputy Paddy Coffey raises the question of a CBA. I say to him what I said to my own colleague Jack Wall, who approached me today on this issue. I'm satisfied to examine whether there is merit in that suggestion. We did that kind of an assessment on North-South. The government promised that it would have an independent international assessment of North-South, and 3 experts were brought in from Scandinavia and Belgium. They did the report, and they concluded that it would cost about 3 times the cost of overheading. I'm not therefore drawing from that should be automatically the cost of from Knockraha to Great Island, back up to Kildare. But that's what they found in that case. And I hear what Deputy Coffey is saying on that. I don't know, Deputy Stanley, I don't know why it wasn't put along the motorway at the time, but it wasn't, and we are where we are, and we need to ensure that the regions of Ireland have adequate power and energy for purposes of employment and economic development, and so on. Time doesn't prevent this evening. Somebody asked for a debate. I'm happy to have a debate at any time to go through some of the... It doesn't allow for going into the kind of detail. But it's not true, Deputy Tobin. It's not true that they're undergrounding across Europe. And you can even visibly see that it's not true. And your particular point about Denmark is not true. Denmark are going underground with 120 cable and have decided specifically not to do so with the 400 kV line. That is an actual decision and so on, and they're a wealthier economy than we are, but I don't want to put it any stronger than that this evening. But there are a lot of claims made that don't stand up. What does stand up is that perception in politics is everything, and there are a lot of concerns out there. And I accept that, and I understand that. But, you know, I repeat, there is no line on the map yet selected. You know, the public consultation process is underway. We will see whether Eirgrid is as dismissive as is being widely alleged. But so far, there isn't a line selected. And some of the propositions put to me, not just here, but outside of the House, do seem a bit far-fetched to me as to why, if you were going from Knockraha and Cork to Great Island, you would go via this as distinct from via here, and so on. But, you know, we established by a decision of this House an expert agency whose task it is to deliver a safe, secure energy supply to the country. They are supposed to have the expertise, technically, professionally, and so on, to do the job. And, you know, the days of ministers drawing lines on the map and saying it shall go here are gone. Maybe they shouldn't be gone. Maybe ministers who are accountable and all the rest, maybe they should have more say in the system. But that's the way it is. Nobody challenges the technical and professional competence of Eirgrid. Nobody, internationally or locally. Nobody challenges that. How well they are interacting with local citizens and so on is an issue that members of this House clearly have strong views on. You know, I hope that we can provide reassurance on that. I hear what colleagues are saying, Chairman. There's a lot of food for thought there, and I'm doing a lot of thinking at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Minister. Gentlemen, I purposely let the Minister stay in longer in order to try and answer the comprehensive list of questions that were put there forward. Our next topical issue is in the name of Deputy Brendan Smith, and it's to the Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. The recent statement of the Attorney-General to the Northern Executive in relation to the cessation of prosecutions of crimes committed before the Good Friday Agreement. The Deputy has 4 minutes to make an initial statement, and the Minister of State has 4 minutes to reply.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I'm glad that the Minister of State is present to take this debate. Over 3,600 people died in the troubled era that scarred this island for more than 3 decades. The wave of violence that consumed so many lives in the north has left a dark legacy for an entire generation, and in particular on the shoulders of the families of those who lost their lives in the Troubles. Out of that bleak period, the Good Friday Agreement emerges as a shining light. For the first time since 1920, the entire island voted as one, overwhelmingly in favour of moving beyond the arid, bloody battles of the past and towards a shared future. And it was a privilege for all of us to have the opportunity to vote in that referendum in May 1998, which received a massive endorsement both north and south. And it was the first time that the one question was put to the people on this island since 1918 as well. However, that agreement was not a free pass to the individuals who chose the route of violence that terrorised the north over 30 years, nor was it a general moment of collective amnesia. And of course, my own southern border counties constituency was affected badly, as was all of the island. Yesterday's announcement by the Attorney-General of Northern Ireland, John Larkin, that all prosecutions of Troubles-related crimes committed prior to 1998 should cease was a shocking act of indifference to bereaved families and their inherent right to truth and justice. Beyond criticisms of the constitutionality of such an action or its viability in the face of international law, it is a basic fundamental tenet of common decency, the very bedrock of society, that victims deserve the truth. Yesterday's policy kite flown by the Attorney-General denies that basic claim to justice. It comes at a deeply unfortunate time when the Haas talks are tasked with setting out a coherent framework to confront the myriad of issues surrounding the past. Its launch would also appear to be coordinated with a PSNI report lamenting the costs of investigating cold cases and the burden of resources employed by the Historical Investigations team. I sincerely hope that it is not softening the ground up for a move away from the state's obligation to uphold the rule of law which exists regardless of timing. The Attorney-General has called for amnesty legislation to be enacted in Westminster to encompass the UK, and he advocated that mirror legislation be put through the houses of the Oireachtas. In effect, this would mean that grievous crimes perpetrated here, such as the disappeared, that continue to languish in a limbo of terror, or roving, unaccountable British Army death squads, as uncovered by BBC Panorama investigators, would go unmarked by the state. And indeed, Anne Cadwallader's recent publication details the bloody activities of some of those who were employed in the state forces. The past on this island is touched with sadness and tragedy. It represents a grave challenge to all of us who are working towards building a future free from the sectarian passions and violence that tainted the lives of previous generations. But this does not mean running away from difficult questions. It does not mean that all victims were the same, and that all who lived through those decades share the blame. In reality, there were those who took up the gun and resorted to ruthless violence for their own ends, while there was a majority who sought peaceful means to achieve legitimate aims. Thank you, Cahiri.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, you have 4 minutes to reply.
Thank you, Laskin Corda. At the outset, I know all members of the House will agree with me that these statements offer a timely opportunity to recall the suffering which so many victims and their families endured as a result of the violence in Northern Ireland. In recent weeks, we have marked painful anniversaries of horrific events, including the Shankill bombing and the murders at Dail. A recent publication, Lethal Allies, has recalled allegations of collusion in 120 murder cases, while the recent BBC and RTE documentary on the disappeared has reminded us vividly of how deep is the suffering of bereaved relatives. I understand that a BBC Panorama programme to be broadcast tonight will include allegations of killings and shootings of unarmed civilians by members of the British Army. For many of these people, the past is their present, lived and recalled every day. Some may talk of drawing a line under the past. Many of these relatives cannot, and we cannot say that we are truly reconciled until their needs have been recognised. This serves to underline the importance of addressing the past in a manner that addresses the need of victims and also allows society to move forward. However painful, we must find ways to acknowledge and to deal with what has happened. Substantial efforts have been made since the Good Friday Agreement to address the legacy of the past, and this government has been steadfast in its support for the existing institutions, such as the Historical Inquiries Team and the Police Ombudsman. While there is undoubted pressure on the court system and on the policing service in the North arising from legacy issues, the needs of the victims and their families must be accommodated in any future process. Richard Haas, at the request of the Northern Ireland Executive, is currently chairing the panel of parties talks, which is looking at how best to deal with the past, as well as with other contentious issues such as parades, flags and emblems. He has undertaken to make proposals to the Northern Ireland Executive before the end of this year. As part of this consultation work, he has met with many victims groups and is continuing to do so this week. The panel of parties talks, chaired by Richard Haas, provides an opportunity to make progress on how we deal with the past. This is an opportunity for the parties of the Northern Ireland Executive and also for victims groups and wider society. The Government is fully committed to supporting this process and to finding a way forward on all the issues within the remit of the panel of parties talks. We will continue our work as co-guarantors of the agreements to progress reconciliation in Northern Ireland and across this island. Dealing with the legacy of the past must be part of the transition to long-term stability and peace. We remain convinced that efforts to address the legacy of the past should be motivated above all by a commitment to making progress towards reconciliation and towards a cohesive society.
The Deputy has 2 minutes for a supplementary statement and the Minister has 2 minutes for a concluding statement.
And I thank the Minister of State for his reply. It is very clear to all of us that all about the past has to be victim-centred. Abandoning justice for victims would be an abdication of our moral and civic responsibility to those who endured during those grim days. It is a betrayal of our duty to the men and women who were always committed to peaceful means. The history of the Troubles cannot be left to those who bloodied their hands in it on either side of the conflict, be they perpetrators of state violence or paramilitaries on either side. I trust that the Minister will take the opportunity and the Government to rule out any such mirror legislation being enacted in this jurisdiction and will endeavour to, within his remit, to ensure it is not promulgated in Northern Ireland. The comments of the Attorney-General would suggest that he wants an end to prosecutions, inquiries, inquests and civil proceedings into killings related to the Troubles, whether carried out by paramilitaries, police or the army, with a line on the past drawn up at the time of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. Recently in Armagh, I listened to Denise McMullen, daughter of Dinny McMullen, who was shot dead. I listened to Seamus Mallon outline the terror that was inflicted on so many people in Armagh and Tyrone, with collusion from so-called state forces, from both British Army, UDR and police in the north. The people who suffered so much must have justice if at all possible. I feel, and I'm realistic enough to know, that in many instances it will be very difficult to bring to a conclusion some of those inquiries. I listened to members of the Finucane family, the sons of the man who was so brutally murdered, and they were angry, understandably, about the suggestions of the Attorney General. I hope I recall their comments correctly. Some of the phrases used by the Finucane family were ill-judged, ill-advised, very irresponsible. How can we deal with the past if there is no process of examining the past? And the suggestions, the proposals put forward by the Attorney General would do untold distress and cause untold distress to bereaved families and those who were the victims as well of the collusion by state forces that was so well laid out in the work of Aaron Cadwallader in that recent publication, Lethal Allies Collusion. Thank you, Oireachtas.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you very much, Deputy. And indeed, the timing of the announcement by the Attorney General is indeed very curious in the circumstances as you've described. And I would agree with you entirely that the needs of the victims and the bereaved are paramount. This has been a difficult year for Northern Ireland. It is clear that the past has exercised a corrosive effect on political life and on community relations. The ongoing issue of finding mechanisms to deal with the past requires the ongoing commitment of the two governments along with the Northern Ireland Executive and wider society. The Government remains committed to playing an active and constructive role in dealing with the past, including through the management of commemorative, cultural and community events in a sensitive manner. And in this context, this is the decade of commemorations is now underway. As part of this process, the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach attended remembrance events in Enniskillen and Belfast on the 9th and 10th of November. The Government's view is that the overriding objective is to make further progress towards a more reconciled society in Northern Ireland. The Government, as guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement, and really this is at the nub of the situation, it is the two governments, the two sovereign governments that are the guarantors and that make the commitments. But as guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement and of the process as a whole, must ensure that there is no weakening of those commitments. We will continue our work as co-guarantors of the agreement to progress reconciliation in Northern Ireland and across this island. Dealing with the legacy of the past must be part of the transition to long-term stability and peace. The suffering of all victims of violence in Northern Ireland must be acknowledged and addressed as an essential part of the reconciliation process. Richard Haas and his team are currently chairing discussions on a range of contentious issues, including dealing with the past, with a view to making progress before the end of the year. We have faith in that process and will be supportive of any outcome that can command sufficient support of the talks participants and helps progress reconciliation within Northern Ireland and across this island.
Thank you, Minister. Our next topical issue, in the name of Deputy Jed Nash, is to the Minister for Environment, Community and Local Government. The absence at local authority level of guidelines on the introduction of through-floor lifts in housing adaptations. The Deputy has 4 minutes to make an initial statement and the Minister of State has 4 minutes to reply.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to raise this issue and I'm grateful that the Minister is here this evening to listen to my concerns and the concerns of my constituents and to hopefully be in a position to respond. We're all, of course, very familiar with the generally excellent work carried out by our local authorities and contractors in terms of housing adaptations for older people and people with disabilities. As I said, most of this work is carried out for our elderly to allow them to continue to live independently and overcome any difficulties associated with their advancing years. One of the most common problems encountered is that of people no longer being able to get up or down stairs, and usually, as the Minister and the House is only too well aware, the solution is often the provision of a downstairs bedroom or bathroom, or the installation of a chair lift or a through floor lift. At least that was traditionally the case, and there was always really an emphasis on trying to provide accommodation on ground floors. It's the option of a through floor lift which has caused me some concern in recent times. I think there are a number of issues at stake here. I know of one case where a constituent only wanted a chair lift up the stairs, a much easier and a cheaper solution, but the local authority was insisting on installing a through floor lift based on the recommendation of an occupational therapist, who simply refused to take into account the expressed wishes of the older person who was affected. In this particular case, the elderly person was essentially told to take it or leave it. A second issue, and a really important issue that we must be aware of, is that these lifts are sometimes being installed in houses which are totally unsuitable for them and could even endanger the lives of the people using them. I've been in a number of small, often terraced houses where the lift has become the sole point of access to the upstairs bedroom, and has also effectively blocked off windows. I don't think any of us need to be architects, civil engineers or fire officers to acknowledge that there is an inherent danger in that. I have looked at some of the guidelines in operation just across the water in the UK. One example from the Isle of Wight Council clearly states that, and I quote, "Accommodating the occupant at ground level should be a first consideration whenever possible." I can understand, Minister, how in these straitened times that more needs to be done with less, but when less means a through floor lift, where no official guidelines, it appears to me, at local authority level at least, are in place, then we should all, I think, be very concerned about this system. I think where a through floor lift must be used, there are stringent requirements which must be put in place, including fire barriers, smoke seals, alarms, sprinklers and so on. Critically, there's an absolute insistence that the bedroom should have an opening window large enough to facilitate a rescue and escape in the event of a fire or other type of emergency. We're currently operating, at least at local authority level, without any similar guidelines, and I'd very much appreciate it if the Minister can establish whether guidelines are available to local authorities from the Department of Environment, Communities and Local Government. I think we must have a much clearer system in place. Everybody needs to be clear on what their obligations are, and I think this needs to be kind of rectified before there is any sort of unnecessary or avoidable tragedy.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 4 minutes to respond.
First of all, I'd like to thank Deputy Nash for raising this important point, and certainly there are very serious issues which you've raised. Local authorities, as housing authorities, have an overall role in relation to ensuring that local authority dwellings meet the needs of tenants, and through the Housing Adaptation Grant Scheme support people with a disability and older people. Clearly, technological solutions play an important role in this regard, and all reasonable and feasible solutions merit consideration. And I will certainly, in relation to the very specific points that Deputy Nash raises, I will go back and look to see whether if we don't have guidelines, whether we can specifically supply guidelines in relation to this area. And I note that you've suggested that there would be equivalent guidelines in the United Kingdom. I certainly am aware and feel very strongly about the need to make real and meaningful provision for vulnerable groups, and in particular those with a disability or older persons. In this regard, my department has published Quality Housing for Sustainable Communities as design guidelines for local authorities in furtherance of the need to deliver quality homes and sustainable communities in a manner which aims to ensure all households can access good quality housing appropriate to household circumstances and in their particular community of choice. These guidelines promote the essential requirement that dwellings should be capable of adaptation to meet changing needs of residents during the course of their lifetime. Section 5.2 of this guidance deals specifically with the flexibility and accessibility aspect of the design of homes and recognises that older people and persons with moderate disabilities who wish to remain independent in their own home should be able to do so without the need for costly design and disruptive remodelling of the dwellings. The aim of the guidance is to inform by setting out key design principles rather than prescriptive solutions. That said, Appendix 2 of the guidance draws on the Joseph Rowntree Foundation standards for lifetime homes, including the following sentence: "The design should incorporate provision for a stair lift and a suitably identified space for potential installation of a through-the-floor lift from the ground to the first floor." A key aim in the National Housing Strategy for People with a Disability 2011 to 2016 is to support people with a disability to live independently in their own homes and communities where appropriate. The promotion of independent living requires the implementation of a range of targeted actions and supports to assist people with disabilities to remain at home, including the provision of equitable access to specific design options and mechanisms to support people with disabilities who wish to live independently. In this regard, priority will continue to be given to ensuring the most effective operation of the Adaptation Grant Scheme for people with disabilities and older people. While these grant schemes do not specifically reference through-floor lifts, they do, however, place an emphasis on ensuring that the most appropriate works are carried out to meet the needs of the applicant and that the potential long-term needs of the applicant are addressed, having regard to their disability. This, in my view, is the correct approach where individual needs and solutions may vary widely. We are way past the point where a one-size-fits-all solution is tenable. As a longer-term policy objective and in line with the commitment in the programme for government to promote and support universal design, an examination of lifetime housing policy will be undertaken, which will also consider the accessibility needs of wheelchair users and the increasing role of technology in supporting people with disabilities to live independently. And in this regard, I will certainly consider the points that you make, Deputy Nash. And I know that they're very specific to these through-floor lifts, and if there is an absence of guidelines with regard to those, then I will certainly look to rectify that.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy, you have 2 minutes for supplementary statements.
Thanks, Chairman. It definitely appears to me that there is an absence of guidelines in my own experience dealing with local authorities and others in regard to this issue. I'm concerned about this, Minister. I'm very concerned about the fact that there's no guidance, it appears, in place from the department to local authorities. And I'm also concerned at the fact that local authorities themselves don't have access to any particular guidance, or haven't taken it upon themselves to introduce any guidelines at that kind of level. It seems to me that there has been a move away from providing extensions for older people, people with disabilities on the ground floor of properties on the basis that they are costly. And I understand the difficult times in which we are living and the demands on the resources available to the department and to the local authorities themselves. And by and large, local authorities do an extremely good job working with the limited resources that they have. I just have a settled view that the decision to focus on the provision of through-floor lifts as opposed to extending accommodation on the ground floor is motivated by lack of finance rather than anything else. I don't believe either that fire officers, for example, are consulted about the appropriateness of introducing this type of equipment into homes. I'm dealing with a case at the moment of an individual who is on a substantial amount of medication, whose GP and his consultant is absolutely opposed to the provision of a through-floor lift because of the particular condition that this individual is dealing with. His health would suffer, and his general experience in that lift would really be problematic for his health for a range of different reasons that I'd prefer not to go into at the moment. But this kind of approach isn't working, and I really do think that the department has to look at working with local authorities to introduce some kind of guidance here with chief fire officers, with occupational therapists and with others who are interested in this area to ensure that we have the kind of solutions that will work for older people and for people with disabilities, notwithstanding the financial constraints that we're all dealing with at present.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, I absolutely share your concern that we should have proper and appropriate solutions for people's individual needs. And I know that different local authorities probably do have different approaches, and some of them do still do extensions, etc. But one of the things we are doing is that we are reviewing the scheme at the moment, because we want to make sure that we get maximum value for it. And I will certainly, in that context, I will ask about the guidelines. But I do take your point that there are issues around safety. There are very serious issues that you have raised, Deputy Nash, and I can assure you that I will deal with it as quickly as possible, and that I will come back to you with regard to the specific points.
The Dáil stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.